All right, thank you, Mrs. Giffen. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the actual first joint Black student virtual panel. We are very lucky to have students from Mount Carmel here with us. And so I'm actually going to turn it over to Jael, who is going to give you more of an explanation of how things are going to go and how they're going to introduce the panel. But once again, thank you, and we appreciate you for coming.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Simmons, for the introduction. If you don't already know me, my name is Jael. I'm the president of the Black Student Union for Del Norte, as well as the Equity and Anti-Racism Task Force. And today I'm really glad to be our moderator for our first Black student panel. So we have had a few panels in the past, maybe you've seen them, but this is our first Black student panel. So we're very excited to have this. And we're just pretty much gonna go right into it. We're going to start with a few reminders for our audience, and then we're going to introduce our panelists. But before I go into that, I would just like to say that we do have the privilege of collaborating with Mount Carmel today. Mount Carmel is one of the other high schools in our district, and we're very glad to have some students and staff from Mount Carmel. So everyone just give them a warm welcome, and we are going to get started. So these are a few audience agreements. We go over them every time we have a panel. So the first is listen to learn, not to refute or respond, and also listen with empathy rather than judgment. And we also want to recognize that everyone's experiences are unique and valid, and testimonies and experiences are not to be argued against because they are objectively true to that person, and we don't want to invalidate any experience they have. And also, please save any questions you have until the end. We ask that the audience does not unmute or spam the chat. So please wait until the end. If we have opportunity, we will ask for a Q&A. If not, we will send out a form that you can fill out later. But we do want to have the attention on our panelists. Another thing to acknowledge is that individual experiences differ even within the same communities. So please try not to make generalizations about the Black community based off of our panelists' answers. We do not want to put the burden on having to represent the entire community on our panelists. So these are individual experiences, and let's not try to generalize based off of them. Okay, so our main goals of the panel are to give space to some of our Black students to share about their identities and experiences, and also to educate our audience on the diversity of the Black experience, especially during Black History Month, where that is a main focus. So if you didn't know already, the theme of our panel today is Black Joy. So I just want to explain what Black Joy is, because some of us might not be familiar with that term, or maybe some of us might have heard that term, but not really knowing what it means. So Black Joy, defined by some people, is an act of resistance. So it's acknowledging that the world is anti-Black and is set up to ensure that Black people do not succeed. But Black Joy is when Black people choose to still live life and choose joy. So this is a quote from a Black activist. So amplifying Black joy is not about dismissing or creating an alternative Black narrative that ignores the realities of our collective pain. Rather, it is about holding the pain and injustices we experience as Black folks around the world in tension with the joy we experience in the pain's midst. It's about using that joy as an entry into understanding the oppressive forces we navigate through as a means to imagine and create a world free of them. So all in all, Black joy is not about what some may call toxic positivity, but instead it's about acknowledging both the struggles and the joys of being in the Black community. So after establishing this, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, which is Laylee, and she will introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Jael. Hi, I'm Laylee. I'm also a member of the task force. I'm really excited to be here for this panel today. So if the panelists would like to unmute, I don't know if we have a specific order for them to go in. Okay, so we can start with the MC students. We can start with Shadway. Is that how you pronounce it? Perfect. Please say your name, your grade, what school you go to, your pronouns, and answer the first question. And the first question today is, what are different ways you experience Black joy?
So my name is Shad Wed. I'm in 12th grade and I go to Mount Carmel High School. My pronouns are she, her. And sorry, could you repeat that question again?
Sure. So the question is, what are different ways you experience Black joy?
I feel like I experience Black joy honestly just by like living life as anyone else would, but like especially in like public spaces where like people can just like look at you and like stereotype you, or just be like Black and like proud, like loud and Black. Like I don't really care what other people are seeing or thinking about me. I just like do what I want to do, and that's how I experience my life, just Black and proud.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Jocelyn.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Sykes. I'm a senior at Mount Carmel. My pronouns are she, her. Am I answering the same question?
Yes.
Okay. I experience Black joy when I'm surrounded by a community of people who understand me and look like me. So this can be like when I'm eating with my family or hanging out with my close friends. When I feel like people support and understand me, that's when I really experience Black joy. And I feel like my identity isn't just like some weird taboo subject. It's when I feel Black joy the most.
Thank you. Nalia?
Hi, my name is Nalia Marion. I'm a junior at Mount Carmel, and my pronouns are she, her. My favorite way to celebrate Black joy, I think, is getting my hair done because for the longest time I would constantly straighten my hair because I wanted to fit in with other people and it had an effect on my identity. But now whenever I get my hair done or as I'm learning how to take care of it better, it makes me feel happy in my own skin.
Hello, my name is Terrence. My pronouns are he, her, theirs. How I experience Black joy is by centering my Blackness not as a burden, but as something to be happy and comfortable with. And that has to do with things like self-care, um, like they said, taking care of your hair, but also consuming media that doesn't center Black pain, being around other Black people, celebrating our Blackness, being blickety blackety Black, like as much as I can because I can. Like I will be as Black as possible. I'll be the Blackest person in the room, and that brings me joy because we're often denied that. We're often denied that comfortability in being Black, and so that's an act of resistance to me, and that is a form of like happiness to me.
Thank you. That's awesome. So those are all the MC panelists. Now we'll go on to the Del Norte panelists. So first will be Mrs. Coleman.
Hello, I'm a staff here at Del Norte, and Black Joy for me is all of the activities that I've been able to participate in that propel our community, our youth, working and mentoring with my sorority, participating in the arts, theater, choir, my church. I was fortunate enough to be able to be comfortable with entire Black faculty from majority of my K-12 experience, my church, my community. I come from back east. So there's a variety of ways that I've always been able to enjoy Black joy with those in my community.
Thank you. Kelly?
Hi, my name is Kelly, and I'm a senior at Del Norte. My pronouns are she, her. And way I experience Black joy as a person who kind of grew up in Southern California where my skin is like misrepresented. I definitely think considering acknowledging other Black people is a strong form of Black joy because that way we are noticing that we are both experiencing the same amount of struggle of living in a predominantly white neighborhood and going to predominantly white schools. And I think like we're able to respect each other no matter what, even as strangers, And that's just what I think of Black Joy, how I experience it.
Thank you. Camila?
Hi, everybody. My name is Camila. I'm a junior at Del Norte, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And what Black joy means to me is just like the confidence to express your Blackness as a centerpiece, despite like the biases and perceptions from society.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Nick.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. My name is Nicholas Gilmore, and I attend Del Norte as well as a junior. And Black Joy to me is celebrating Black excellence and achievements made for the Black community. It is happiness that comes from being proud of being Black and understanding my part in the world and helping others find their part in the world as well. I can also experience Black Joy by helping others understand the Black perspective. Instead of holding grudges against ignorant people, I strive to turn those people away from like ignorance and celebrate their improvements.
Thank you, everybody. Now I'll turn it back to Jael.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and welcome to all of our panelists, both Del Norte and our friends from Mount Carmel. Before we move on to the next questions, I just want to give a warm welcome to somebody from the district who is here with us today, Ms. Hara Shantanet. She works at our Power USD district as the Director of Equity and Improvement. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Whitlock, who is the advisor for Mount Carmel's Black Student Union. I also will be answering some of our questions today as a moderator. So I would just like to say how I experienced Black Joy. I think this relates to something we heard some of our other panelists say, but I personally struggled a lot with trying to appear more like my white peers, and something I always struggled with was my hair. And I think the thing that gave me the most Black joy personally was deciding to lock my hair, because I was just connecting back to my culture, especially as a Jamaican. Locks are very common and it has a lot of spiritual meaning. So I think that's something that gave me a lot of Black joy, just embracing me the way that I am.
Okay, so our first question is, why is it important to celebrate Black joy as well as acknowledge the past and present struggle of Black communities? So first, we'll hear from Terrence.
For me, you can acknowledge the struggle of Black communities, but it, you would have to look back at how we can persevere through those situations. And I don't feel that our struggles is what define us, but how we got past it shows our strength as a people and as a race. Because you could think about these conditions and how absolutely like terrible they were and still are, but it's the fact that Black people live otherwise that makes us so powerful and so resilient. And I don't like resilience as a quality to describe anybody, because it's like we shouldn't have to go through those things in the first place, but it shows that we can still do it and come out as winners. And that's why I think that you can still celebrate Black joy and still acknowledge the past struggles.
Thank you. Mrs. Coleman, would you like to respond next?
I would say it's important to celebrate Black joy, to make sure that it is part of the dialogue of the broader community and just not within the Black community, to understand that there are more than one stories to tell and everyone can enjoy in similar fashions, no matter what color, race, creed you are. So if we are continually bringing our stories to the forefront in a positive manner, hopefully that gives more conversation and understanding for those that are directly in our community.
Thank you, Mrs. Coleman. Next, can we please hear from Jocelyn?
I think it's important to celebrate Black joy but also acknowledge the past and present struggles, because obviously we live in a time where it's really frustrating that we still have to go through so much and fight so much and we still don't have complete equality. But it's important to stay positive. But at the same time, we do need to acknowledge that there is still like a lot of work that needs to be done. And we need to like understand that there's generations of trauma, but we aren't a broken people, and we're still a community of success and like beauty and all that.
Thank you. Can we please hear from Camila?
So it's important to celebrate Black joy because it's always important to know our roots, but also to know that it wasn't always the way it is presently. And it causes us to cherish the tinier and joyful aspects of being Black. And like, although recognizing Black trauma is needed, celebrating it is just as important.
Thank you. Can we please hear from Shadwa?
I think it's beautiful enough that we have the ability to still be full of joy and enjoy all the things we do with all the things the Black community has been through. And I think it's important to acknowledge our past because thinking about how, like, where we are now versus everything we've gone through and are continuing to go through in history, it's like we can't just ignore that. But it's important for us to still enjoy like the beautiful cultures of being Black and like the diversity of it all. But yeah.
Thank you. Would anyone else who hasn't spoken like to respond to this question?
Yes, I would like to respond to this one. I think that it's important to acknowledge both sides because a lot of the times, because the Black community has been through so much, people think that it means that being Black is a bad thing. And I think being able to say that, no, being Black is not bad, being Black is amazing. It's society that makes it difficult is really important. And then also find the strength to still be proud of yourself, even when you're hearing all of these narratives that you shouldn't be proud. I think that's a very powerful thing that we're able to do.
Thank you, Jael. So the next question, which is question 3. So the question is, what experiences as a Black student on your campus have made you feel valued, empowered, or heard? What can others do to make you feel more valued as a Black person? So the first person to respond will be Nelia.
One of the only experiences where I felt valued and heard was in my ethnic studies class. That was the first time I actually got to share my opinions because in previous history classes, we mainly focused on white history rather than Black. So I felt that was the first time I got to share all my opinions and hear other students' stories and their experiences. And I think that class was really helpful because it really showed that there is some sort of racial divide in my school and other schools and just all around in society. So I feel that was really helpful for me.
Thank you. Mrs. Coleman?
A couple of experiences that have helped make me feel valued is acknowledging when racial epithets were presented in administration and coworkers were diligent in acknowledging that it wouldn't be accepted or allowed here at Del Norte, as opposed to just combing over it and making sure that feelings wouldn't fester of being insignificant by being called the N-word. Felt that was really relevant.
So can we please hear from Nick?
Of course. For Black History Month, I know my school it's doing a lot of like there's like chalk writings on the wall and stuff like that, which is really good to like see how many people like pitched in and helped out and like kind of oh my goodness, sorry, give me a second. Like pitched in to raise awareness of it. And I know some of my teachers are also having like Black authors, Black writers, a bunch of like notable Black figures, and they're like highlighting the importance of them and what they do to like improve our lives like as Black people. And so seeing how many like Black celebrities and even my parents come forward and like express their Blackness is like really empowering because growing up in a mostly in a neighborhood that people don't like look at you like look like you, it's not like debilitating, but it's like you don't know what it's like to be immersed in that culture, and so then you feel like a disconnect, and then it's just not a good recipe for anything. But yeah.
Yes, so for this question, Camila said that as Vice President of the Black Student Union, our meetings are mostly joyful. I am so glad to have a space that values and empowers you as well as others. A core cherishable memory was when our union was taking our yearbook photos. We were brought together as a family.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to answer this question?
I would like to. For me, when it comes to people that hear me, I feel like anybody who has the ability to hear can hear. What it really takes to be an ally to Black people is you need to listen. Uh, what I mean by listen is when they're telling you something that you did wrong, your immediate response might be to be defensive against Black people because you've been programmed that way. You've been taught all your life that whatever Black people say is just like monkey language. Like it's not something that's valuable and their agency is not valuable. But in reality, when they're telling you something, it's because you either did something that actually hurt them or you're defending a system that oppresses them. So I just really want people to listen rather than just hear what Black people are saying. And what made me feel heard is really when I'm around my own community because I feel like other people aren't hearing what I'm saying. So it's like, why waste my breath? Why take out my joy when I could just celebrate with people who are actually listening to me?
Thank you. Does anyone else want to respond? Okay,
I'd like to
Jael.
respond. I think something that makes me feel very heard on campus is just the fact that I am able to be in the positions I'm in. So being a Black, queer, disabled girl on campus and having the opportunity to be president of the BSU and president of the task force really makes me proud because that's a privilege in a lot of different places. Somebody who looks like me would not really be able to have these kind of positions on campus and be able to like have a voice on campus, but I do. And that makes me feel very empowered as a Black person and also my other identities. And I also think that the few times people have told me, you know what, I don't know what you're going through because I will never understand your experience as a Black person, but I believe you. I think that's very powerful. As Terrence said, a lot of people get defensive when they hear Black people speaking out and they kind of tell us, oh, it probably wasn't a racist thing. Maybe you're taking it the wrong way and things like that. That's really invalidating. But if you just listen and you're like, I have never experienced that, I probably never will, but I do believe you. And like, let's make this better. Let's find a solution. I think that's something that makes me feel really great as a Black person.
Thank you, Jael, and to everyone who responded. So the fourth question, which I will write into the chat right now, is do you feel that your classes include accurate representation of multiple groups of people or the groups that you identify with? And first we will hear from Nalia.
When you ask that question, are you considering more of like the teachers and the curriculum or more of the students?
I think the question is talking more about teachers and curriculum, but you can talk about either.
If I'm being honest, I have never once in my life had a white teacher. I mean, a Black teacher. So, I mean, honestly, of course, it doesn't matter if they're Black or white, but it would make me feel comfortable if there were teachers who looked more like me and someone I can relate to more. And the curriculum is mainly learning about white history and all of the history classes. My ethnic studies class is the only time I really learn in detail of Black history.
Thank you. Shadway?
So for me, I feel like up until like a literally senior year of now this year, I've never had a lot of our history, Black history seems to be like othered every time we learn about our history, it's not like the great things that Black people can do and have done. It's about slavery, it's about oppression. It's just like every single thing we learn is so negative that it makes it seem like Black people can't be successful. It makes it seem like there's nothing good in history that they've done. And taking ethnic literature and ethnic studies this year kind of made me realize like how different my high school and middle school life would have been if we had access to these classes our entire life. And it sucks really bad that we finally now get to experience it in like literally like most of our last year of high school. And I'm glad that these exist now, but I just really wish that we got the opportunity to take these before, and how they teach our history and how our history is presented to us needs to be changed like really badly, because the way it is now, they're training or raising these Black kids to not believe in themselves by only teaching them these negative things. And I'm glad that it's changing, but it still needs to like get changed.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, so I'm definitely on the same page as Shadway. Like, it's our senior year, and we just now are receiving this course where we could take to learn more about our culture and teach other people about our culture, which is sad how we have to graduate or be ready to graduate for this to actually happen. And like, I also feel like in the classes, they're doing a really great job with representing our culture and our history. You know, it always needs some like improvement because it is like new, but I really think that it's helping us unify like our environment and help create a better classroom space for Black students and other students of color. But it definitely hasn't always been like this, which is unfortunate.
Thank you, Kelly. Jocelyn?
Unfortunately, Jocelyn did have to leave for a sports practice, so I am able to read what she said. So for this question, she said that this year I'm taking both ethnic studies and ethnic literature, and never before had I had such a diverse class. I grew up getting used to being usually the only Black kid in majority white classes, but in these classes, there is not only representation of the Black community, but various other marginalized and minority groups. Also, there is much a different ratio of men to women along with various ages in my class.
So the question is, what is something you wish your peers knew about your identity and experiences? So you may use this question to share things that are more on the negative side, since the other questions emphasize positivity. It's up to you. Can we hear from Nick?
Yes. So to answer this question, I wish people knew how it felt to like be Black, to feel like the token person in the room, because I know growing up in mostly like suburban neighborhoods, people like, oh, can I touch your hair? Or what it like, they don't know like the impact it has like on a young Black individual to be told, oh, you're good for a Black guy, or you don't act Black. And so I feel like if people knew like what it felt like to be Black and what like labels are already put on you, then I think we'll all have like a better understanding of the words we use and how we use them, because my dad had to teach me these lessons at like the age of 10, that I can't say certain things that my peers say or my peers can say, and certain things that I do, people are gonna frown upon. So yeah, I just would like a deeper perspective of how I'm seen and stuff like that.
Thank you, Nick. Jael, are you ready to read Camila's response?
Yes, sorry, I was having a Wi-Fi problem. So Camila said that she wants to talk about AAVE. So before I read her response, I do want to say what that means. AAVE stands for African American Vernacular English. A lot of people misunderstand this as slang, but it's actually technically a separate dialect of American English. So I just wanted to clarify that before I read what she said. So Camila said, it's extremely uncomfortable to hear you guys use Black accents, or as some would call Black sense, and AAVE on a daily basis, considering the environment we have grown up in together. When you speak differently, as talking in AAVE around Black individuals to fit in or sound cool, it is especially ignorant. Please just be yourself.
Thank you. Can we please hear from Nelia?
Something I wish my peers could understand is just because someone is Black does not mean they'll fit all those certain stereotypes. For example, just because I'll do like edges on my hair does not give someone the right to say that I'm ghetto, or if I wear a certain outfit, it does not mean I'm ghetto at all. It's just, that's just who I am. And I feel people should be more understanding and sympathetic of what our culture has been through and how the different types of slang, like someone said earlier, can affect me. And just being more understanding that it's just, it doesn't feel good.
Thank you. Can we please hear from Kelly?
I would like first start off with like how in from my experience, I have like most of my high school career, I've actually always had braids for the most part. And I just remember, you know, freshman year, just like ignorant white boys would always say, oh, I like your dreads or blah, blah, blah. And back then, it was, I guess, acceptable to call locks dreads. But honestly, I would tell every person who believes that, that dreadlocks were an interpretation by white people of what locks actually are and what they represent, and the true culture behind that, and the true reason why people lock their hair. And dreads come from like dreadful, which is like not like related to locks, because they are, it's a process that takes so much courage to do, because you are locking your hair, like it's like signed, sealed, delivered, like you can't go back. And it's a like a long process, and you have to be very strong for that. And for people to call it dreadlocks still makes me uncomfortable. And the fact that people call braids dreadlocks make me even more uncomfortable, because now you're getting culture mixed up. And another thing I kind of wanted to bring up was how in like a classroom setting where we are talking about hard things like racism and slavery, where when students do bring up their experiences of racism, I don't like when people take like insensitivity to things as a weakness, and like as someone being a difficult person. Like if they experience racism like on campus and they bring it up, you're like, oh, you're just sensitive. But that's not what it is. That's racism. So like I just wish like that was something that I saw as a freshman. So yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. Can we please hear from Terrence and then Shadway after that?
Is this with me? Okay.
Mhm.
We were just talking about AAVE like before the question even came up, because the thing is, people like to take that slang because they think it makes them cool. Because they see us as cool. They want our bodies but without breath. They want our rhythm without our blues. They like to take aspects of our culture, but instead they just disrespect us. And it's because they know that we created these things and we were separated from our original African cultures, and we had to create something new. And we did. We created something new. We created something cool. But you don't get to take it again from us. So from that, that's why we find it so disrespectful, because we were forced to create a new culture since we were separated from our original one. And to just take it like it's nothing, or to say that, oh, Vikings created braids or this, that, and the other. But no, like we are the blueprint, and we always were, and we always will be. American culture is nothing without Black culture. So you should just give us our respect where it's due.
It's like they want everything about being Black except for the actually being Black part, because like I have like an example is you see people online and it's basically like a caricature. Like they'll put on the braids, they'll put on the accent, they'll do all they can, but then when it's time for them to get serious or when it's time for them to go back to normal, all of a sudden the accent's gone, the hairstyle's gone, like everything is back to normal. And that kind of makes it seem like they see our culture as a costume, like they don't see us as real people, they see us as something they can mimic and something they can copy. And that's just really disrespectful because we are people, as Terrence said, we are the blueprint. Like you can't copy the original people. And it's just, well, I could go on about this for hours, but that's what I'll stop it there for now.
Thank you, guys. Next, can we hear from Mrs. Coleman?
My experience is much different than most of the students here because of the community that I came from. I'm from the Chicagoland area, and I grew up in a Black community because things are very segregated in the Chicagoland area. So all of my teachers were Black, principals were Black, counselors were Black, you name it, police chief was Black, the mayor was Black. I can count the number of Caucasian teachers that I had, K-12. I literally can count them and they were less than 10. So Black culture was just every day. Having anything that you all experience for once a year or something was an ongoing conversation. I was very comfortable in who I was and the type of student that I was. My hair was not a question because everybody in my class was Black. All the girls were Black. We all wore the same hairstyle. So when I did in 7th grade go to a school, a parochial school, where I was one of 2 Black students, it was an eye-opener of how being out of my cocoon, my immediate community, people actually doubted. I was so strong in my identity by 7th grade that I realized that there were real problems in the broader community society because I knew I was a straight A student. I knew who I was. I felt beautiful, and I didn't understand why those teachers couldn't see that. So that was an anomaly to me. It was hurtful, extremely hurtful. I had a teacher that didn't acknowledge me for an entire semester. She never looked me in the face. She called my name one time, didn't acknowledge my work, whether I was straight A's or not. She wanted me to just disappear. And I thought that was extremely odd. So I empathize with the students here because, again, I was the exact opposite of what's at Del Norte or in this community because I grew up in everything that you could imagine was Black excellence and Black joy. I would say that at this point in my life, I don't have a need to make or want to make anybody understand me any more than they choose to try to attempt to. If other adults that I interact with or interface with, if they haven't brought it upon themselves to find it important enough to learn more about the Black community, so be it. That's just where I'm at personally. If I was 16 or 17, I can understand. I've lived through a lot. I went to a historically Black college because I chose not to have to fight to have a voice, not to fight to say, hey, I'm intelligent. If everyone is, or a majority of the students are Black and you have Black professors, I'm not fighting again to try to prove who I am or that I'm supposed to be at the table of higher education. So at this point, accept me or you don't. That's the way I feel about it.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Coleman. That was a really interesting story to listen to. Jael, would you like to answer?
Yes, I loved all the answers for this one. I was very impressed. For me personally, I think something that I would love my peers to more so to think about is just to consider giving us our space. And by that, I'm tying back to what Terrence and Shadway said. In general, all spaces in this country in particular were meant for white people. and we were excluded from all of these spaces, and we had to make our own spaces. And it is deeply hurtful when we are judged for that. For example, the entire campus is safe for white students. We have a Black student union because we have to create our own small space in the classroom once a week during lunch, only half an hour out of the 7 hours that we're at school, to guarantee that we have just a small amount of time throughout the entire year to feel safe. And for people to say things like, oh, Black student union is inherently racist because you're excluding white people, we cannot exclude you from your own world. We are living in your world. We are living in your spaces because you excluded us. If we weren't excluded in the first place, we wouldn't have to make these things. We wouldn't have to start our own trends, our own culture. But we did, unfortunately, and we did so well. And yet we are being judged. We're being pushed out of the small space that we have, and our trends are stolen, and different people are given credit. Our language is stolen, and people call it slang or Gen Z language instead of what it is, which is African American vernacular. That's very hurtful. And so I would just like everyone to think about just being more cognitive, because the world was made for you if you're white, and there might be struggles in your life, but they are not because you are white. They're for other reasons and other aspects of your identity or how you grew up, but it is not because you are white. But for me, automatically, when I came out, I was Black, and that came with a lot of terms and conditions, unfortunately. And so I would just like for people to consider that just giving Black people their space, letting us keep our trends. I'm not trying to gatekeep here. That is not what I'm trying to do. But just consider that people who have to create their own spaces, let them have those spaces because they deserve it. We've been through too much. And another thing to think about is that even if a Black person hasn't been through a lot of racist trauma individually, they still feel that trauma. It's community trauma, it's intergenerational trauma. I personally grew up in a predominantly white suburbs my entire life, and I haven't experienced as much racism as most Black people. But still, even right now, talking, I am on the verge of tears because I feel the trauma of my community. I feel the struggles when my Black peers talk about it, when my Black family talks about it. I feel the trauma of my family who was taken from Africa and brought here to be enslaved and then go through Jim Crow and then go through racism, and the trauma of my other part of my family who got to stay in Africa but experienced hardships because it was colonized by France, and France came in and brutalized them. And I feel all of that every day, and it's like a weight on my shoulders. And that is something that a lot of people will never understand, but please try to empathize. It is a deep trauma that we feel every day, whether or not it's even happening to us right now. Personally, we feel it all the time. And so when you're on TikTok and you hear a cool word that you've never heard before and it sounds cute, or you see a style that does not make any sense on your straight hair, maybe just appreciate it for what it is, beautiful. Maybe just consider learning more about it, but please give us our space because we need it, we deserve it, we've been through too much. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
I'm gonna give you your snaps. You ate that.
I agree. Good job, Joe. That was amazing. And then did Camila or Jocelyn write responses for this question?
No, they did not. So I am the last person answering.
Okay, perfect. So those are all the questions that we have today. So for any of our panelists, are there any last thoughts or ideas that you would like to bring up about Black Joy or anything related that we talked about today?
I want to say, check up on your Black friends if you have any. If you don't have any, then you probably need to reconsider why you don't. But hello, no, not my frozen face. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. I'm so sorry. My computer died. I don't have my charger. But what I was saying is that right now, your Black friends could be going through so much that you don't even know about, because Black people have been conditioned through like years and years to hide their trauma or to try to get past it in the best way that they can, and usually unhealthy coping mechanisms. And something that can just bring joy to their life is checking up on them, saying like, how are you doing, da da da, like especially when like news breaks out of another police brutality incident. You really don't know the psyche of Black people when those things just happen, because they're always watching their back, like anything could happen now. Like the threat of being Black is incredibly real and tangible, even if it's not to you because you're not Black. It is still real to actual Black people. Just the threat that you could be like dead this minute, the other minute you were just alive, like that threat is very much real. But yeah, we live otherwise. Like I've said that before, even with that threat, Black joy is weaponizing that and saying, I don't care. Black joy is saying, I'm gonna live anyway. So that's what I wanted to say there.
And then do you mind if I add on to that? Okay, so I would just like to personally say, I didn't have too many Black friends growing up because, you know, I grew up in such a suburban neighborhood. So it's not that I couldn't relate to them, but it's that I didn't know like what like to say around them. Like I don't know, how to describe it or explain it, but I couldn't like connect to them in a way that normal Black people like usually do. And so a lot of my Black friends I know, I went to San Marcos, and that's a whole different school. I went to a different school, like I went to many different schools because I'm in the military. So I've got to meet like a whole slew of different people. So a lot of my Black friends would actually call me like whitewashed, or, oh, you act so white, or are you act so proper, and stuff like that. And so it's like a weird topic to go over, but I feel like I don't want to exclude anyone from being my friend simply because, you know, I don't like connect with them in a way that I want to connect with them, if that makes sense. Like I want to, because like he was saying, you don't like know how people like deal with like trauma and then like experiences and stuff like that. So for me, I know I try to be like everyone's friend. It may not be like the best thing for me because I know there are a lot of like not good people out there, which I do acknowledge. But coming from like my past, that's one thing that I can't help but do. Like I'm a super friendly like person. And so that's honestly one of my downfalls if I don't like take that into like account. So yeah, just putting it out there.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you to all our panelists who responded. I'm gonna turn it back over to Jael now.
Thank you, Laylee. So that was our last question. We do have a few minutes left. Before we do anything else, I would like to say another thank you to everyone who has spoken. Our panelists were very vulnerable today, so I hope everyone was listening with open ears and empathy and takes what some of our peers said to account. We do have about 6 minutes left, so we do have an opportunity for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions for our panelists, do feel free to put it down in the chat. We do prefer that you put in the chat rather than unmute. But yes, we do have a few more minutes. So if anyone has any questions they would like our panelists to answer, we are open to hearing them.
Thank you, Jael. And we just want to say thank you to you for being a great moderator. And if you do want to ask a question, you can chat to me directly and then I can pose the question. And I just want to say thank you again to Mount Carmel. Principal Magno was here, and also Principal Schultz from DNHS was here, and along with so many more of our teachers and students and other guests. So thank you to our audience for taking the time to listen, and I will be recording and then posting the recording, and I will share that with Mount Carmel too, so you can post that so that students can watch and hear the panel if they weren't able to attend. And we do have a question in the chat. So one of the questions here is, what are some examples of AAVE, if you are okay with answering that?
Please let me answer, please, because this is specifically for me, because people like to copy how I talk, because I guess it's like, for one, I'm Black, but like also queer, so like there's a lot of languages that come from both communities and communities together, like both Black and queer people specifically. And so like when they hear me talk, and they like to copy what I say, or they hear something on TikTok and they're like, they hear me say, so they think that it's okay. Some examples of AAVE would be like period, sis, lay, per, push and pee. That has become annoying. Like that has become a thing on TikTok that people are saying now, and they don't really know where it comes from. Just don't say those things. Like if you, and when it comes to AAVE, it's not even just specific terms or words. It's a caricature of Black people in the way that they talk. If you're using it like, oh, I don't want to go to the store today. Her like, I just be so ghetto. Like talking like that is just a caricature, like a literal like mockery of Black people. Like, don't do that.
And like the funny thing about most people who speak using AAVE or like non-Black people is they all sound exactly the same, but AAVE is different in like different places. Like people in like California versus people in Florida, people in Texas, people in New York will literally have like different terms and different versions of AAVE, but then somehow any like white person or non-Black person that speaks AAVE has the same accent every time because they're faking it. Like it's not real. We can tell when they're faking it, and it just makes it 10 times worse when they try to like lie and say, oh, this is how I speak. It's like, no, it's not, be yourself. But that's how it ends up happening every single time.
I would like to add on too. AAVE, one thing that's really misunderstood is that it's not just a group of terms or words. It's an entire dialect, and it has, like any other dialect, it's actually like it has its own complexities. And so, for example, like even the grammar structure is different. Some people might think it's improper grammar, but it's actually just a completely different system. So, for example, I forgot what it's called at the moment, but using the word be. So instead of like, I always go to the store, like I be going to the store, or something like that. It's not just a word, it's not just throwing that in there, it's an actual completely separate term, like because there's like present time and past tense. Yes, the habitual be. Yes, so it's a completely different tense in language. And so like any other language is completely complex. And so if you're not native to a place that speaks it, because there are some non-Black people who do grow up in places where AAVE is all around, but especially if you're going to a school like Mount Carmel or Del Norte, you're in the San Diegan suburbs, I doubt you were surrounded with AAVE like that. I wasn't. I don't consider myself a speaker of AAVE because it just doesn't make sense. I grew up in a predominantly white and Asian area. And so just realizing that when you hear these words thrown around, they're not just words, they're not just slang, they're not just trends. A lot of the things that are coming up on TikTok today have been said since the 90s in Oakland. You just didn't know. But so yeah, just realizing that it's a completely separate dialect. Technically it's called a sociolect. But yeah, it's very complex. And like Terrence said, there are many examples and you can even search them up.
Thank you, Jael. So we have one last question. We're at 3 o'clock, so I'm going to just pose this last question. Is it cultural appreciation or appropriation to have braids if you have them done by a Black person as a celebration of their culture? Kelly?
I would like to start off. That is a common question I hear from a lot of non-Black people, and I've had a person tell me, well, my mom got her hair done braided because their mom was white. My mom's got her hair braided by a Black person. The Black person was okay with it. One, Black people are just trying to get their money. And two, I still don't find that okay, even if they go through with it. Like I said, they're trying to get their money. Like they can't, if they deny a service, that means that's $200 less in their bank account. Like, shoot, I would take on that. But I would say like that type of justification doesn't like, it still like takes away from the fact that that culture appropriation is putting yourself within a culture that you shouldn't identify with because you don't identify with the race tied with the culture. And I kind of define that as cultural appropriation, is putting yourself within a culture that doesn't belong to you. And honestly, like a good example of culture appreciation, because I get it if people are like, well, I love Black people, I want braids because I love like their culture and I love everything. That's not appreciating it. Appreciating it would be helping another Black person like pick out a hairstyle, or helping the Black person get the hair for their hairstyle, or even learning how to do their hair. Like if you have a Black child and you're white, learning how to do their hair is culture appreciation, but culture appropriation is putting yourself in that culture that doesn't belong to you.
I would like to add on to that. Like Kelly said, I have a friend. She's not Black, but she loves Black hair and the culture behind that. And so, as a way to appreciate, she's educated herself about it. And I have wrist problems, so it hurts for me to braid my own hair. And she braids my hair. She doesn't braid her hair; she braids my hair for me, because she knows about the culture behind it and stuff like that. So she will help me, and she'll give me like some tips about things, just because she's like a whole expert on it at this point, even more than me. And so I think, if you want to appreciate a culture, like go learn about it. You don't necessarily have to do it yourself. But especially when it comes to something like braids, I feel like it's just like a no-go when it comes to there are specific braids that are specific to other cultures. Like for example, Native Americans, they have their own braid styles that are specific to their culture. That's a completely separate thing. But when it comes to Black hair braids, especially things like cornrows, when you're doing cornrows on your hair and thinking it looks cool, you're not realizing that there are people, our ancestors, who had to cornrow their hair and put rice inside of those cornrows because they weren't given food breaks while they were out in the plantations. Like there's heavy things like that behind our styles and our trends. Even though we smile when we do them, there's a lot of heaviness and history behind it. So I would say just refrain from something like that. Like learning about it is great, but doing it yourself, especially when it doesn't even make sense for your hair texture, like it can actually be damaging for more straight textured hair to do Black hairstyles like that. It's actually damaging for most white hair types. Yeah, so I would say that's probably more of cultural appropriation.
Thank you so much. Nicholas, did you want to add?
Yes, I would just like to add, since you brought up the topic of cornrows, I noticed that there's a kid going around our school who is also not Black. He also has cornrows in his hair. And my brother also has a class with him. And he says things like, oh, like they're too tight, oh, it hurts and stuff like that. And he said, my brother told me that he said he did it because he thought they would like look cool, I guess. And so I don't want to, so yeah, I just think it's like really weird that he would do like a thing like that and have like a Black friend who's like perfectly okay with that, who like he doesn't know the connotate, like the, oh my God, like the reasoning behind it. Like he doesn't understand the purpose of having cornrows in his hair. And so, yeah, I just thought that was really weird for him to like have it and like just flaunting it around. He's kind, he's like eating it.
All right. So thanks again to all the panelists. Last year when I came to PUSD, one of the first things I saw was a Black student panel at our school, and it inspired me. I think I told some teachers and students before, I actually kind of gave up on this idea that things would change. I'm from the South, I'm from South Carolina. So I just assumed that racism was something that's just part of our life. We're going to see it all the time. But seeing the students actually have the courage to get up here and to speak, it definitely inspires me that like our newest generation will be able to make some really good changes. So I really appreciate you all, coming out here, pouring out your hearts and just being honest and open with everybody, because I think it is making a difference. It's making a big difference. And for old people like me, we like to see it because, it's going to even change us and make us one. That's one reason I'm part of this, of the task force, part of the, when Kelly asked me to be part of BSU, I jumped on it because they inspired me and I'm like, I'm going to do what I can. And so thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. For those of you who came in to watch, we definitely appreciate you taking the time to see this and to listen to these student story. And I can't wait till we do it again, because this is something I hope that we continue doing just year after year.